Hello, I'm George. This is GLLR Cars. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking the 2020 BMW X3 sDrive 30i. The BMW X3 is the mid-size to compact size BMW SUV. These SUVs are basically the SUV version of the 3 Series. There is an X1 and there is an X2. Those are smaller. I've reviewed those. Actually, I reviewed the X2 but not the X1. Well, the X2 is more like the size of about a Mini. It's more like a little hatchback. The X1 is a little bit more like this but slightly smaller. I would say that this will probably be in between there. There is an X5, and the X5, which I've reviewed, at the time I called it a mid-size, and the reason being is because there is an X7, which is the full-size one. So I would say that depending on the size of the SUVs that you like, there is a compromise between size, weight, how agile or nimble a car may be. If you don't like cars that are too big, and if you think the X5 is a little bit too big, then this is the sweet spot for you. Again, they make it smaller, but again, it's all about compromises. This car right here, the sDrive 30i, is the one that is configured with the 4-cylinder engine, and it has about, I'll correct myself on the screen, around 235 horsepower approximately. I'll put the exact amount down below. But the idea behind this is that this is basically the entry-level powertrain that you can get in this vehicle. And for an SUV, is something like this enough? It's something that I will be able to tell in the driving section of this car. But just first impressions, looking at the outside of the car, it is a very good looking design. I like how BMW was able to, make it spacious, not cut too much off of the roof, yet have enough of an overhang and a little bit to have that little bit of a visor in the back, and still have very big, very broad in the front, where you have you can tell that it's going to have good visibility in the front, yet it has big kidney grills and a little bit aggressive in the front. I believe that BMW is knocking it out of the park by setting up these cars the way that they are. If we take a look in the inside, this car that has the lighter colored interior is quite appealing. At least the way that I see it, it does. Many folks think that BMW has not made too many changes with the interiors. I would say that they've been evolutionary rather than revolutionary. The center stack and the infotainment system has had several iterations where sometimes it's been in dash, now it kind of pops up and out the way it does here. The controls are, at least in this model, are very simplified. You really don't see a whole lot there. The way that they lay things out are somewhat simple yet elegant, and I think that the car, for being a small SUV, is fairly spacious. The interior space here, and I'm going to go ahead and just take a quick sit inside here. This is quite generous the way it's set up to have someone anywhere between 5'10" and 6'2" have plenty of knee space here, and plenty of head space is significant for a small SUV like this. So if you're looking for at least 2 rows of seat with plenty of space, this is quite fine. Taking a look at the storage in the back, so it does have, for instance, the tailgate that you can close it with a button, or you can close it with your key fob, or actually in the front of the vehicle, and it's got the button to automatically unlock it. It depends on what you're looking for in terms of space, but if I just go ahead and move this shelf back a little bit, plenty of luggage space here unless you're really going on a very long trip. And in addition to that, it has a little bit of storage there underneath where you can put a few small items. So I believe that when it comes to storage space, again, it's not as deep as you would want in a full-size SUV, but it's generous enough that you can get most basic day-to-day in an SUV like this. Again, unless you're looking for something that has 3 rows, in which case you do pay the price by having to make room for that. You will normally see something that like in the X7, X5s, but if this is the size SUV that you like and you think that the storage space, to give you an idea of what you'll be able to fit in there, maybe about 3 golf bags across the bottom, and then maybe about another 3 on the top, so long as you don't have the privacy shelf. But with the privacy shelf, is something that I recommend in an SUV. Why? Because if you're going shopping, say for Christmas, and you put in some gifts in there, and usually bad guys can see through the glass and see that there are things in there, you want to cover them up, make sure it doesn't draw any attention. That's the idea behind that. It's not supposed to be load bearing, but it does give you the ability to make things a little bit private. Now, coming over to the driver's side, we have the new infotainment, and let me just turn it on here. That BMW has basically set up where the gauges, and I've talked about this before in some other BMWs, where it is now the digital gauges, where it has the speedometer that operates in a traditional clockwise type of movement, while the tachometer operates counterclockwise. For some people that's an issue, for some people it's not, but basically that's the case there. You have, just as an FYI, these horsepower in foot-pounds and torque in foot-pounds and power and horsepower indicator that you can change with the stock. There's a button on the stock here that you can toggle what you want to see. You can see radio stations that are playing. You can basically see in what mode you are. You can have mileage, miles per gallon, instant and average calculated as you drive, and you have you know, like a trip computer basically on there. I usually like to leave it on power and torque settings. The navigation screen that comes with these, they used to have the more detailed maps on the larger BMWs, the 5 Series and the X5s. Now in the 3 Series and the X3s, we now see that same level of details on these maps. So they have improved that, and they've improved it considerably. In terms of space that you're looking for here, you get cup holders, USB connectors. Over here you just have your different driving modes, and when you have the auto hold and parking sensors, your iDrive that you're very aware of, and then down here on this just center storage area, it is okay. It's probably about on par with all the other SUVs of this size or in this class can do, but nothing strange there. I've covered a little bit infotainment in some of the other BMW videos that I've done, so I'm not going to go over that too much. But other than that, the only thing to point out is this particular model has the larger panoramic style sunroof. It opens quite far back, so it does give a very big open type view, especially for the folks in the rear seats, that they can get this very nice view and openness of driving the car that way. I'm going to close it back up because it's the middle of summer and don't want to have to be battling the sun at the same time. But that's basically a quick rundown of the interior. Up next, I want to talk a little bit about my driving impressions. During the driving portion of this video, I experienced some serious sound issues, so as a result, I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of the driving impressions while I was just cruising around in the car, trying to feel if it was fun to drive, if it would exceed or at least meet my expectations, and I would say that it did. My first impressions were that the car was very quick, that got off to a quick start from zero, and it accelerated in an agile fashion. I would probably describe that as nimble, considering that this is an SUV. And the actual ride, even though it was not the softest ride, it did have very good handling. It didn't feel like the car was rolling a little bit on its body from side to side, or feeling like it was to some degree a heavy vehicle in any manner or underpowered. One of the things that I can say about BMW is that it is anything but underpowered. Even with that 4-cylinder engine, it felt that the engine was very responsive and definitely very fun to drive. The view for the passenger was very good as it is high. You can see the hood and the road right in front of you all the way around. I think in terms of the back, it does have a couple of headrests that will obstruct a little bit. The one in the middle is a little low, but definitely a pretty good view. I was thinking about why is it that the nimbleness and quickness, agility is important in a car, especially in an SUV. In an SUV, traditionally we've thought of as cars that are somewhat slower, maybe not as agile, and maybe not as exciting to drive. But I think what BMW has done is that where it matters most, which is when you punch it a little bit for a small burst, or you make a quick turn, and you're able to zip along in an SUV that makes it feel like it's a much smaller vehicle than the one you're driving, then you definitely have a winner in your hands. And I think that's basically what BMW did. I can zip along, I can punch it, I can make turns quickly. I feel like I can zip around town fairly in an agile manner, and I don't feel like I'm driving this boat with an anchor attached to it. And I know that many SUVs that are not exciting feel that way. I would never say that about a luxury SUV, because usually part of the requirement is to have acceptable power. But I think BMW took it to a step where it's a little bit more than acceptable. Again, I won't call it fast, but I would say that it does feel nimble. And that is something that you have to experience when you drive it, because it cannot be this, well, it can be described, but it doesn't convey the message. So very nimble, very quick, very agile, and definitely a pleasure to drive. So after driving it, I was pleasantly surprised that it was quite agile. This car was, it felt very stiff when it make turns, yet it was not uncomfortable on the ride, and very agile for an SUV, considering that this is the entry-level engine. By the way, just talking about engines, I talked about earlier that this is the 4-cylinder version, and this car, there is a 6-cylinder version, and then there's an all-wheel drive version of the 4-cylinder engine. So this one here, MSRP's at around $41,000 to start with, and you pay $43,000 if you get the one that has the all-wheel drive, which is the X-Drive. It'll say BMW X3 X-Drive. And then if you get the M40i, which is the inline 6-cylinder, then you're talking, it's going to get, you know, up into the 50s. So it depends what level of performance you expect or what are you looking out of the SUV. But this is a very good driving vehicle. It was a pleasure to drive. It had good visibility, good driving dynamics, very good nimbleness. I think the only, if I'm looking for, start splitting hairs and looking for a negative or what I wouldn't like, it's maybe a result of what you expect from a BMW. And in this case, it would be maybe the sound. And I think that, I probably said this before, BMWs are not known for out of the box, if you want to use that terminology, sound. So you're not going to get something that's going to have a deep rumble, especially with a 4-cylinder engine. Even the 6-cylinder ones, they sound okay, but it depends what you expect out of the vehicle. It is a luxury SUV that has sports components so that the driving experience is not boring. So when you drive one of these, it's anything but boring. And how much performance you want to get out of them is how much you're willing to pay to get even more exciting experience out of the driving. So it's probably no surprise, because you're probably wondering why is it that I reviewed so many BMWs. It's one of those brands that I discovered, started driving more, and Granted, I tend to be somewhat biased because I've owned 2 BMWs and I've driven many BMWs before. But that doesn't mean that there's no other cars there that are good. It's just that when talking about this particular car, it is a very good car. It is an exciting car to drive. And if you're willing to pay the money for it, for something equipped like this, which by the way is maybe the entry-level one, it's still not bad. My name is George. This is GLLR Cars. And as always, drive safe.